Maybe he's having a really bad day.
There you go.
All right, it is 6 o'clock and you are recording.
All righty, let's call to order here. Can we get a roll call, please?
Chair Watson. Vice Chair Elhunt.
Here.
Member Strom.
Present?
Member Chisholm did submit a letter that he was going to be absent tonight.
Okay.
Member Johnson.
Here.
Member Hughes. And Member Hart.
Here.
Okay, we do have our minimums for a quorum.
Okay, let's get started. Let's take a look at the minutes from last month. Anybody have anything on them that you see that isn't correct from what we did? If there's no corrections to the minutes, can I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
There may be one correction.
Okay,
I don't think code enforcement director was here last week. These may automatically populate.
was Dave? I think Dave was here last time.
Yeah,
wasn't
Dave
Was
was
he
here
here?
last time, yeah,
Yeah,
he
he was.
was.
Okay.
It was me.
Oh, yeah.
So it was me.
Was Rita
It was
here
the
last
time before, yes. I was here last time, not the time
It was
before.
the August meeting.
He was the August.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so we had a motion to
Motion,
approve
yeah.
and seconded. But all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye, okay. All right, let's go on to significant events from code enforcement.
And yes, I do not have any public comment by email or sign up.
Okay, thank you.
Code enforcement significant events, we do have some staffing updates. As you will see, I'll introduce Division Chief Chad Reed and Assistant Deputy City Attorney Vicki McDermott. Division Chief Chad Reed will join us for a few meetings, and then as necessary, Dave will be back to provide the annual report once a year. Otherwise, due to changes, I'm going to be your solo for the meetings. And then we will have city attorney, depending on scheduling.
Yeah, depending on scheduling, but generally we'll be available if there's questions about procedure or things that our office can help assist with.
Okay. So this is a change to not having a liaison from the police department, is that correct? Or after Chad leaves?
It's all getting grouped
It's
into
all through
one
you?
for all me.
Okay, all right. We may need to look at the bylaws to address that also.
Yes, and that is on the agenda tonight as
Thank you.
well.
All right,
And then the only other update is our public comment per city clerk based on the changes that city council has made. The entire city, including all boards and commissions, are limited to 3 minutes. I know in the spring we voted as a board to have those extended to 5 minutes. I've been told that that is being revoked. We are all following what council does at the 3 minutes. So that's what our agendas and all that are going to reflect moving forward.
my other committee had us moving that up to its current position for the CEAC committee. Is that standard also, that it's early on the agenda?
Yes, so how our agenda is the format that the city clerk is requiring.
Is that something that we need to address in the bylaws also?
No, that's all covered under city clerk, the board and commission policies and procedures.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's all I have.
Thank you, AJ. Council member Russell.
Oh, there's Edie.
Nobody's coming, but.
I was wondering if that hurts.
Hi, Edie. How are you? Good. Should get It's settled. Welcome.
Thanks.
You came just in time, actually. Oh, okay, Rita, go ahead.
Okay, so I really don't have a whole lot. One thing, there is a new chief of police coming, I believe it is November 11th, is that correct?
November 12th, yep.
November 12th. Okay, so that is huge. So I'm not sure, there really hasn't been a whole lot going on at city council. It's been kind of slow. Matter of fact, we didn't have a meeting this Monday because there was no topics for study session. So that's all I can think of right now.
Any questions for? No? Okay, thank you very much. Subcommittee update. Our only subcommittee is our communications committee. Dee Dee, hate to put you on the spot. Is there anything that we need to address?
All I have is the email that we got that was forwarded to me from Dave about send this to the communications team. It was a draft of what is going into the next magazine, Englewood Magazine, and that the graphics would follow. But it also says the code enforcement team will be featured as part of this given October is Code Enforcement Month. So, but I haven't.
So you have a draft there? I'm sorry. I didn't see
That's
that.
all I have.
Okay.
That's all I have. And with no graphics, but that was sent on the 25th, after our September.
Okay.
But I don't know, when does the magazine come out? I don't really know.
I think it's right after the 1st of November. I had I had to write an article. It was due
Did you?
last week
Okay.
also, so.
And this is all I have, so I don't.
Is that basically then, Dee Dee, I'm not, unless you want to, is that basically following our outline of
Yes.
what we provided for them?
Yeah.
Okay, so the two topics that you see there are what?
Our leaf and yard debris and snow removal
Okay,
and snow buddy quote.
Okay.
Snow buddy
so the snow buddy.
will be mentioned as well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, any questions about that? Anybody? Thank you. All right, unfinished business. We left off with reviewing Municipal Code 1132, which happens to be snow. So let's go ahead and jump to that. And
Left it at home.
okay, I hope people have had a chance to take a look at it ahead of time. Is there anything that we want to address, AJ, regarding, or Division Chief Reed, regarding specifics of the code there that we have questions about? I have a couple questions if nobody has something to jump in with, starting with 1132. Basically, we're looking at the owner, tenant, lessee, or occupant. So it's anybody on the property, I assume.
Correct.
At
Anyone
that point.
responsible.
we reference then, or for any agent in charge of the property? So I'm assuming that would be a owner of the property or something along that line that would be, if there were a rental property or lease property or something like that. That refers to
Property manager.
Property manager, okay, all right. This next question I had to do with accumulation of drift at this time of that such drift developed. Obviously, snow needs to be removed, ice needs to be removed as possible. I'm curious about the drift. What is it, how high, and what are we talking about in terms of drifts? Are they, significant drifts, little drifts? It's kind of a weird question, but.
So a lot of this goes based off ADA requirements to keep the sidewalks clear.
All right.
So if you remember the bomb cyclone we had a couple years ago with a lot of snow amount and then a lot of wind, that would not only follow with the wind the following days from that snow, but if we do have a large accumulation, the sidewalks need to be cleared. Then if we do have another wind event that we do sometimes get here, any of those drifts would also be the responsibility to get those cleared after that wind event is over within that same time frame. Okay.
So that could actually happen after the sidewalk was cleared, so it would, okay. That's good to know, thank you.
It was March 13th.
March what?
March 13th.
13th? Was
I
that
can't
the
remember the year, but about 4 years ago, March 13th.
Who's responsible for alleys? Is that city?
So the city, as of last year, does not plow the alleys unless it's a significant event.
Okay.
What their requirements are, I'm not familiar with what their exact amount is, but for them, it has to be a significant snow event to plow the alleys after the primary and secondary roads are cleared.
Okay, so there's no, because it's not a walkable right-of-way, I assume there's no responsibility to the owner of the property to maintain anything out in that alley area, is that correct?
In reference to snow, correct.
Okay.
Have they ever plowed the alley? I mean, I've lived here a long time and never remember ever that happening.
Depending on staffing, I know they have in the past. It hasn't been widespread. So yeah, it just depends on the storm and what staffing they have available and what areas they're plowing.
So it might be more in the business district and maybe the industrial area?
Yes, like the Broadway, the Central Business District, the alleys off of Coma and Lincoln. I do know a little bit more snow events, those will get plowed, just because it is for business access, for trash access. But otherwise, the residential, the dirt alleys, the very seldom used alleys, those would be last priority if they get plowed. But for significant storm events, and we do have the 1-2 foot storms, that is something they will get to eventually to clear those out for residents.
I'm just curious about the difference between weeds in the alley versus snow. Is there a reason they're more of a hazard that the weeds present for like a fire hazard or something? Why no one's responsible for snow in the alley?
So the city plowed the alley, from my understanding, and Deputy City Attorney may be able to answer this, but the alleys are an easement. It's a right-of-way easement. So technically, both owners on either side at one point when that development was originally established gave up their 8-foot or 16-foot alley. So they technically still own that. If you look at the plots, the property line goes to the middle of the alley. So that's why the residents are still responsible for the maintenance of the grass and weeds, trees, anything like that within the alley. The city's removing the snow in the alley, grading the alley, is something the city provides as a service, as a courtesy, because there are alleys. But that is still ultimately the responsibility of, just like paving. The city's not going to pave an alley. However, if those neighbors want to get together and bring the money together and get that paved, there is a process through the city to get that done as well.
Okay.
But that would have to be done by the residents, not through the city.
Makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Rita, am I correct in thinking that when the alleys are, when new property is built, if scrape happens, new buildings on an alley, that the alley is required of the builder to pave that alley section? Is that the way that works?
I think that is true, and we've had some problems because of that. I can think of a couple areas where the developer poured concrete right behind the property, and then it was way above grade to the properties next door. And so, I don't know, I think that's something council probably should address, because I think that if we're gonna pave the alley, we need to pave the whole thing at the same time.
It seems like a patchwork issue, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
you get part of it done, and then the next one isn't done, and then the next one is, and you got this thing going on back there.
Yeah, I mean, that's my,
I know that's not
My
a
opinion.
purview of this
Right.
committee, but.
exactly.
So do they notify the other homeowners? If someone builds on the alley, do they notify the homeowners up and down that alley that part of that alley is gonna be paved?
I don't know for sure. I'm thinking they don't have to. That's what I'm thinking. But I think that probably city needs to make sure that the developer doesn't pave it too high.
It's like my alley is, with all the gravel that they put in over the years, it's probably at least 18 inches higher than my backyard. And it wasn't originally, I can tell, from the steps and the stone
Right,
work on that property. So that'd be a concern.
right. And I think that's a concern. I've gotten calls where when they grade it, they have gates that open into the alley and the dirt is higher than the gate, so.
Interesting. Another question about under number 3 there, under 1132. So the process goes that the owner or the occupant of the property receives a notice. Then the actual owner of the property at the same time, the notice is sent out to them also if there's an issue. Is that correct? Is that what this number 3 says, service notice upon property owners?
So for the property owners, that's for the abatement portion.
Okay.
So that would be where a certified mail would be sent for like a second violation or subsequent violation to the property owner, giving them that time and notification that if this isn't remedied, that an immediate summons could be issued as well as an abatement of that violation.
So if this happened following a snowstorm and, I mean, we have a 24-hour notification for the snowstorm to the whoever lives on the property, and then if that's not addressed in 24 hours, this notice goes out to the owner, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so conceivably, this notice would be delayed, let's say, for instance, if it were mailed out by a day or two after that, is that correct?
Yes.
So we're 3 days out on a snowstorm at that point.
Correct.
That sounds problematic to me.
We still have to give the property owners the time for the voluntary compliance.
Okay,
And we have to give time for the certified mail to get delivered and all that. So once that notification has been made, and this is assuming that we haven't been able to contact anyone at the property. If there's a tenant there or if it's owner occupied and we're able to contact someone, then this step may not be necessary. This is if we cannot contact anyone, specifically for vacant or abandoned properties or properties that we just can't contact. Then we do still have to go through a proper and legal posting process so we can abate the property at that point.
okay.
So I don't have that in front of me, but a few years ago, didn't we decriminalize snow removal so they get a ticket? But then there's still a process for follow-up even after they get the ticket?
Correct. So we can still issue a ticket upon the second violation right away. However, to abate the property as a safety issue, we still have to give that notice as outlined in municipal code for an abatement.
So the notice is given to the property owner, this second notice, and do they then have 24 hours to take care of it, or is it at the point that they receive it that they need to act immediately on it? How is that handled?
So they should need to act immediately, but obviously if it's a certified mail, if they're out of state, I mean, we're looking at a week or so. So the notice of violation or the posting notice that we use is still our 14-day notice. And that's only for that storm. So we may issue the first initial warning. Then another storm comes through, they're still not in compliance. We're gonna go ahead and issue either a ticket to the property if there's someone there, or the posting notice. And then at that point, any subsequent violation after that, because we have given the proper notice, we can go immediately to an abatement.
Under the penalty section, I'm curious, either a result of a max penalty of $500, I mean, I doubt that would be hit, but what would merit something of that high of nature of a penalty against something like this?
I can't answer that because that would be administered by the court.
Okay, so that's out of the court.
That would all be done by the court.
Got it, okay. And then it says plus fees and costs, so I'm assuming court fees also on top of that? Okay, and any cost of abatement by the city, is that included on top of that too, if they need to abate it? The city needs to take it?
So an abatement, that would be a separate process to any summons that was issued.
Okay,
Because since it is decriminalized, it would be just a violations bureau ticket to where they would just have to appear, or now that the courts do it online, they can pay it online as well. If we do end up abating the property, there's a separate process. Once the city receives that bill from the abatement company, it will go to our finance department, that'll get mailed out to the property owner to be taken care of.
Hey Jed, you were basically saying this, but if I fail to remove snow within that time period specified, then a notice can be issued. And once one notice is issued, anytime for the rest of that season, then you can go directly to the next step. You don't need to issue any, based on number, I think 4 in here. Only one notice, basically you get one warning
Correct.
of the season. Okay, just confirming that. Okay.
just for clarification, snow seasons are considered from October to May, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the
According
snow
to this.
season.
So October 1st would be 3 years.
Okay, so a new snow season would then start in the next October. So something that happened in March is not a first issue to the second issue that happens in November.
Correct, it would be the 2024, 2025 winter.
Got it.
I'm thinking a little bit about our previous discussion about weeds, you know? Like, you get a notice and that's it. If something happens again, it doesn't reset.
Snow,
I agree.
Yeah, I think, yeah,
absolutely agree.
it seems fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you get it in February.
You get in February, then the one that's in November is a different, it
Different
resets
set, okay.
because the seasons are.
That's what I thought.
I have a question because I'm a snow buddy. And so I go out and I help out people. And I just happen to be right off of, I think it's Layton that my property. Of course, the snow buddies always get the corner property. So you really get two yards. But the Layton one is one of the main traffic areas that the city takes care of in terms of plowing. And more than once, I have gone through and done my diligence and plowed and shoveled that. And then the city throws that back on the sidewalk again. And I've complained and they have tried to do better, but it still becomes a problem. If that were the case, and let's say somebody came by afterwards and said this never got shoveled and yada, yada, how does that get handled? I mean, the city basically erased the work that was being done.
So all those are taken on case-by-case basis.
Okay.
We've had that issue along 285 for many years, especially now that CDOT's taken it over, where they'll still go 35 miles an hour down 285 and blow it all the way across the sidewalks. It has been determined that it's still that property's responsibility to keep those sidewalks clear based on ADA. Our city plows do try to take that into consideration. However, for the larger storms, there may be some snow that gets pushed up. However, that is all taken under consideration. It is a case-by-case basis. If it is a lot of ice, if it's something where you can't chip it off anymore, if it's that real slushy in the spring and then it freezes overnight, that's where an online angle fix report would be made for a grader for an ice chipping request. And once we share the same system, once that's submitted, if the city is going to take care of that, that sort of puts a halt on any of our cases. Otherwise, if it is a storm where where we have 72 hours of snow and the city's just trying to get it cleared, it would be the responsibility of that property to keep clearing that sidewalk as best they can. Ultimately, we are looking for voluntary compliance. We can tell if someone's been out there and tried versus someone that hasn't done anything. And that's what we're looking for, is just to keep that clear, especially when the storm ends is our bigger concern, is to get those sidewalks clear, make them accessible for people who aren't able to drive if we do get a large snow, ADA compliance as well.
Thank you. Other questions?
As we do get into Title VI, a lot of Title VI is shared with other departments. So as we go through section by section, we can sort of address what other departments will be involved with that as well. But as we do sometimes take lead on these, a lot of these are co-investigated by multiple departments. So that's why it was also included.
Okay. Can you, AJ, let us know which of the sections, so we just don't trip over, and which ones are not covered by code?
So everything in here is stuff that we will address
Okay.
at some point or another. Some of them may be involved with other departments. Some we may end up being the primary. That's why it was included in the packet. So you could review them and look at them. And if it is something that you have concerns on or change on, that's where we can address it with other committees or city attorney to see what changes could be made or who else we have to consult with those. For example, community development, fire marshal's office, anything like that.
Okay. Let's go ahead and get started on this. Is there anything that anyone noticed in 6 that they want to bring up as questions or clarifications or anything? I will jump in with the first one I have. What does the word annoy mean?
Annoy?
How is it, is there a, as there usually is, some official
Bother.
clarification of what the word annoy means? If something annoys me, then it may not annoy somebody else.
And that would be determined normally through the court process.
So it would have to go all the way to the court before an annoying thing was, okay. It seems like an odd word to have in something as specific as this.
We have it, we have it in the criminal code as well, under certain statutes in the Colorado revised statute, that word is in there as well. And I agree with AJ, it would have to, it's for the courts to be able to prove that Clement. So.
Okay. What can you now?
And it's also assessed under like a reasonable person standard. So what would a reasonable person in this situation find about the characteristics or whatever? You know, thinking about it specifically within the noise, chapter 2, whether or not a reasonable person would be disturbed.
So, there's another word, reasonable.
That's just a lot.
Under specific prohibitions, horns and signaling devices, does that include car alarms? Is that referencing those also? Do you know? Then section 65, I'm sorry.
It can depend on the situation, yes.
Okay. 625 Part B says, radios, television sets, phonographs, and similar devices. I'm thinking that that's going to include things like, you know, portable radios. It sounds antiquated to me. Phonographs, most people don't even know what a phonograph is. Is that something that could be addressed in terms of just actually reflective of our current society rather than something from the 1950s?
Somebody may still have a phonograph and turn it up loud.
Right. I would agree with that. But I would
It's a
think that
generic term.
you know, a boom, and I would have put a boom box in there, but that's only
history
30 years later. But I'm thinking of those portable speakers that can be set outside and, you know, I mean, basically creates a lot of noise. I mean, it says other devices, so I guess that would include everything in that. I mean, it's kind of a catch-all term, but.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that I think could be updated at some point. Also with that section, the key point, because we go back and forth with this one quite a bit, is within the last sentence, that everything above, that it says 25 feet from such device when operated within a vehicle parked on the public right of way. So all of these violations have to be done from a vehicle on the right of way.
Including the phonograph. Now, I have cars from the 50s, and they actually did have record players in them, but I think that's been pretty much taken out of most cars. Okay, so this is vehicle violations?
So for example, ice cream trucks playing their loudspeaker would fall under this one specifically. Advertisement from a vehicle for elections or any other purpose driving down the road.
That's under commercial loudspeakers though, right? See? I mean, that's
Well,
basically reference.
Because it's from the right of way, commercial loudspeakers would still be on properties. This one's specifically for any vehicle traveling or parked within the right of way. So food trucks, if they're parked playing music while they're serving, that could be a violation of this section.
Thank you.
What does motorcycles fall under? As far as noise?
So as they are a vehicle on the right of way, if they are a licensed and legal vehicle, they would not fall under ours
Okay.
for
No
the noise
noise.
ordinance. And that was, I believe, brought up to council as a loophole last meeting. That I believe council was gonna be looking into as well.
Good.
Okay. Because I've gotten, even in the last week, a bunch of complaints about motorcycles on Broadway. At all times of the night.
That's the same case on Bellevue. Bellevue is,
Okay.
that straight shot down Bellevue is all the time.
And I think Hampton or 285 is a problem as well,
Yeah.
right?
It seems like I can hear Santa Fe too.
Is that,
It is bad on 285.
what, is there a plan there of how to address, I mean, some of this is between municipalities, like Bellevue is kind of split. How do you, or what is the plan to address some of these issues? Do you know?
So municipally, I do believe council is gonna look at possibly adopting or looking into a new code for vehicle noise. However, that's already covered all under CRS and Title 42 for modified exhaust, deviation from manufactured settings, any of that's already done under CRS. However, with our state inspections, we don't mandate an inspection, we just do emissions. That's something that should be reported during the emission process. So officers, if they pull over a vehicle with a modified exhaust or anything like that, do have options under Title 42 to charge, or even impound vehicles that are in violation of that. So that is statewide. Unfortunately, a lot of that takes the back burner just due to calls for service. But that should be regulated at the state level during annual renewals. But unfortunately, that's one of the few things that's probably an oversight. Just because there isn't the staffing or the inspections for it.
It seems like it's become much more problematic in the last probably 5 years. I mean, it's an issue all everywhere. Question under loading operations, this is 625D. These are loading, unloading issues associated with things happening within a residential district, and then they add in with that hotel and motel. What's the reasoning behind the hotel motel part of that?
From my understanding is that the hotel and motels are still considered a residential, even though they're commercial under a different license, they're still considered a residential property. That's their main purpose, is residential for sleeping. There is another one that's specific to schools as well, for like signaling devices, for trash collection and that. So specifically is because motels and hotels fall within that residential definition of the same type of activity occurring in both.
Okay, thank Does this loading operation issue apply to commercial districts also and industrial districts?
No, it's only the residential.
Just for residentials? Okay. Because I guess what I'm looking at now is that we're starting to sort of blur the lines between industrial and residential and commercial. And, you know, how do you discern which is which and how this is affecting what area? If you've got a commercial operation actually acting across the street from a residential area, does that, you know, how do you do that?
We have a giant map that's put out every year by community development that we will pick the address and see what district it's in to determine if there's a violation.
I have a question about, I guess this would be under commercial, I don't know if it's commercial power equipment or where it sits, but with like trash facilities and, you know, there's a lot of noise that comes from these over by kind of Bellevue Park area, and there's, I don't know if it's not Waste Management, it's one of those companies over there by like Tufts and that area.
Off Windermere?
Yeah, and, you know, we can definitely hear it pretty late at night, you know, the beeping from the trucks and things like that. Is that governed anywhere in here, or are there special exceptions for that?
So based on the zone that they're in is the activities they're allowed to do.
Okay.
I believe without looking, I believe that's considered light industrial in that area. So it would not be under the residential requirements.
Okay.
There is still restrictions. We had the same issue with Waste Management several years ago. After extensive long nights with a decibel reader and that, yes, you can hear the backup alarms, but they don't exceed the decibel readings. So yes, it is something that you hear. We used to have it all the time as well with Winslow Crane property, where they would start at 3-4 o'clock in the morning to get their cranes up to be traffic to the job sites. Because the district they're operating out of is what they're regulated by.
Is that the same, so that's a different decibel level, or is it the same 25 feet and 88 decibels, or it's different because of the zone you're saying?
Yeah, it's different between each zone, between either residential business or industrial.
Okay.
And then depending on what it is, it may have specific decibels as well.
Okay.
So can I ask another question about development areas that are in industrial areas but are next to residential? So do they have the same guidelines? They have to quit at a certain time at night and can't start early in the morning, or?
So if it's a PDU within a, say, industrial area, unless that's been rezoned to a residential or a mixed use, it is still the original zone. So for example, the Winslow Crane properties, from my understanding, that is a PDU, but it's still an industrial zoned area. So you do have residential properties in an industrial area right next to industrial operations, which yes, does create the issues. But instead of doing a zone change for that property, they chose to do the PDU, and that would be a planning commission decision to approve or how they want to move forward with that.
Okay.
So noise from an industrial area right next to a residential area, even though the zoning isn't changed, would still just fall under industrial zoning. So it's conceivable that we could get complaints from those people to say, hey, this is, and is there a resolution to that in terms of, do we need to have code addressing something like that, or what?
It is an issue that comes up quite regularly. That there is, I believe, in Code Next in Title 16 that was addressed, and it's being left how it is. There is for new builds requirements for noise and other requirements for that, but it is as it is unless it's actually rezoned. Per our municipal code, it is still staying whatever that area is zoned for. For example, the medical district, they're allowed to operate 24/7. So unfortunately, we get lots of complaints. We used to have the Fight for Life helicopter complaints quite often, but that is, they're zoned and allowed to operate 24/7. which means trash removal, deliveries, of course, emergency services, fight for life, generators, backup generators, that's all zone that they're allowed, they have to operate 24/7. So unfortunately, we do get the complaints quite often. We try to mitigate if there's an extenuating circumstance where a piece of equipment is not working correctly to limit some of the sound, which we had an issue a few years ago. We try to address those, and that's where this will sort of tie in with the fire marshal and building department as well to do their inspections. But otherwise, it is, unfortunately, it's a shared zone. It is a mixed use, and that's what we always follow, the least restrictive for those type of complaints, which in the medical district is the 24/7 operation.
I'm concerned because if I were a person buying a $1 million townhome
In Inglewood?
in Inglewood, yes,
lot of them.
near or in a PUD area, there was no sort of requirement to disclose that the noise, parameters are different than they would be in a residential area. And I mean, I can see that coming back to the city. And just having to be more of anything, what you're describing, AJ, was just problematic. In other words, we're dealing with things that we could maybe have headed off if in fact that had been written into the purchase agreement or something along that line. That seems to me kind of something, and I don't know if that's a council issue that it needs to be addressed or something like that. And maybe we wait until it's a problem. But if I were a person like that, and somebody said, I'm sorry, they fly this helicopter in all the time and that's just the way it is because you live next to a hospital. Well, that was never disclosed when I purchased the property.
Okay, but if you're purchasing a property, you also have the obligation to find out what's going on around that property.
I understand that.
And those helicopters, they fly right over my house.
Right.
And it does not bother me
Yeah.
at all because I know they're doing something that's important.
Let
They're
me
saving
pick a
a life.
different example. Let me say that we're redeveloping, there's a PUD that's going out off of Navajo out there. And that wait a minute, there is one going off of Navajo right now. But, here you've got a number of industrial areas, light industrial areas that have, backhoes and forklifts and all kinds of things in operation. And those people who are buying into that facility really don't know that that's going to be part of their life. And it seems to me that we address that for people in purely residential areas. Why don't we address that for people, especially as we are transitioning these areas into more residential areas? That's my concern.
Again, I still don't see that as an issue. If you're buying a property in an area, you have the obligation to find out what is around you. It's like someone buying a house next to a farm or a feedlot.
Mm-hmm.
You see the feedlot is there. Do you not think you should check out what's going on with that feedlot and if the wind's going to be blowing your way or not? So the person buying the property has the obligation to check it out themselves. I don't see how that's the obligation of the city to do that. That's just my opinion.
And I'm not saying that, I guess where I'm coming from is that we have written rules. We don't expect everybody to sit down and read through these rules so they understand the parameters of what they live with. The city over the course of decades has created rulings which make it easier for us to assume that residential areas have these rules. We're talking about those sort of in-between areas right now. The ones that are beginning to transition more toward residential via a POD or whatever it's taking to do that. And I'm just concerned that we're not thinking about what may be a problem that will cost the city. Because what we're talking about is somebody who's going to get a phone call, AJ's going to have to address it or whoever it is. And if we can mitigate that, then we can have fewer costs associated to the city.
So you're not, what I'm seeing is that you're saying is that we're going from industrial business areas into residential. We're not going from residential into industrial. It normally does not go that direction.
Residential, you mean a residential area into an industrial area?
Yes.
No, that is happening.
Into an industrial area?
Yes,
Okay.
that happened.
The residential areas are
Sam's.
becoming industrial areas?
Not the other way around.
The industrial is becoming residential, correct? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That, they can see that there is industrial there when they buy the properties. They're not gonna be in a residential area and have all of a sudden a industrial area next to them developed and those houses knocked down. That would
That's
be
correct.
extremely unusual.
That would,
So they can see that there is an industrial area in that area when they decide to buy that house.
that's true.
So they already know that there's something there. It's not going the other direction. So they have the obligation to say, if there's a residential area here, do I really want to be close to a residential area? Or to a industrial area? So
Okay.
that's up to them in my view.
Thank you.
Well, and I think that there is another problem that happens with that though, is that we're developing these industrial areas into high-density residential areas, and there's single-family homes that were right, they knew when they moved in there that it was industrial, but they didn't realize that it was going to become high-density housing.
That I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you, because we're getting too much. It's alarming how many apartments, large apartments are going up in Inglewood right now.
And so
a
that's
concern.
kind of why I asked about the noise situation at the Sam's Automotive project. Can they work later there in the evenings than if you're, let's say, people were building a big duplex in the middle of a residential area?
I believe that one, based on their building permit, they're limited to the 7 to 7 unless there's a special exception that's made.
Okay,
But per their permit, I believe that one is 7 to 7.
okay. Which is what it normally is, right, if it's in the residential area.
What's going in there, apartments?
Uh,
More apartments?
Some high density, but some townhouses too. So,
That's gonna be a tricky traffic area.
well, yeah, the traffic is gonna be
Oh,
the
it's
problem.
already a tricky traffic.
It's it's tricky right now if you're not in the right lane when you go east from Costco.
Any other questions about 625 or moving on? I had one last question, has to do with the section M that says animals and fowls. Isn't that duplicating 71A14 when you're talking about animals and noise and things? Because isn't that talked about in that, in 7 also?
So Title 7 talks about barking dogs, and then for fowl, it talks about keeping it clean for odor in that. However, there is no noise for like chickens or roosters in Title 7.
Okay.
That's covered under this one.
Okay. 626, quiet zones, questions there? I'm assuming the quiet zones are done around areas which are obviously needing of quiet, like schools and churches and things like that. If a church were to be held in a residential area, would it not apply? Let's say a residence was a normal gathering place for a church. Would there be anything addressing that at all?
So quiet zones are established through community development
Okay,
based on the use of that property. So it would depend on the situation, what the actual use of the property is, and how that's developed.
okay, so, okay,
So I can't answer specifics on that one.
I think there's also a signage requirement so that the neighbors and people on adjacent property can be aware that they would need to
okay,
perhaps comply with the quiet zone.
makes sense. Thank you. Okay, going on to 627, city-related and public activities and emergencies. Any questions about noise associated with those?
I just wanted to go back to quiet zones for 1
Sure.
second. It has to be, this reads to me like any school, but it has, not every school, right? Because it has to have the signage as well, or is it every school in Inglewood is a quiet zone?
That I'm not aware of.
I'm,
Have to look at.
I don't know of a school that doesn't have a sign.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, so I would think that it would encapsulate all that.
I just haven't noticed, I wasn't sure if they all had signs or anything. Okay.
And some of the quiet zones are specific locations on properties.
Okay.
So we do have some rehab centers, some, not retirement homes, but like recovery centers.
Yeah.
That they will have certain areas when you enter that this is a quiet zone, but it's within the property, so it may not be the entire property. That's where we see it most of the time, which is all done through the planning and development stages for that property.
Okay.
Is there a decibel setting for quiet zones? Is there a level that it needs to be below?
No, not that I'm aware of. It's still just based on that zone's decibel levels.
Okay, 627, any questions on city-related and public activities? I'm assuming most of that goes through the city in terms of permitting and things like that, so that it's allowed.
Correct. Yeah, and C under that section would fall into any city contractor. We get this a lot with water main breaks, working at 4 o'clock in the morning or starting work, because it's still a city function. For an emergency repair, that would be allowed even through a third-party contractor. It doesn't have to be a city employee doing it.
They're very important. Had a lot of breaks in my neighborhood.
If a neighborhood were to do a block party, would that fall under A here in terms of allowable, variances on noise?
So, yes, with a block party, there would be the city permit that would be issued, and that would include allowable for amplified music or whatever was going to be used. So that would be done through the permitting process.
Okay, and would that necessarily need to stop at 10, or could it be permitted beyond that?
Based on the permit, it could go either way, but most of the time, if it is a private permit for like a neighborhood block party that's not sponsored by the city, it would have the deadline.
Any other questions about 627? Okay, moving on to 628, maximum permissible continuous sound pressure level measurements. Questions about that? It's basically putting parameters on what noise is. Okay, now 629, undue hardships. That's similar to city-related stuff, okay? 6210, enforcement and remedies. I have a question. I want to know who wrote this sentence. Violations of any of the provisions of this chapter shall be prosecuted in the same manner as other violations of the city code provided. However, that in the event of a violation of any of the provisions of this chapter, a written notice of intent to prosecute may be given the alleged violator not less than 5 calendar days prior to the issuance of the summoned complaint. That seems like the longest run-on sentence. And I get confused about halfway through it. I think I got it, but it just seems verbose.
It's from the city's original code in 1985, so I would imagine you can include that.
Okay, and my last comment is in section B. It refers to reasonable persons of normal sensitiveness.
Sensitiveness?
Sensitiveness is the word.
I don't think that's a word.
Sensitiveness. Oh, I'm sorry, sensitiveness. Is that a word? Sounds like a word. It includes discomfort and annoyance. It's one of those that just seems to be very, very vague. But I guess you can't put a lot of parameters around that, so I'm back down. I just thought I'd mention it again.
When was that written, in the 50s?
85.
85?
Part of, yeah, it's part of the 1985 code.
It was much more quiet back then.
Isn't that the truth?
Okay, any other questions about enforcements and remedies beyond my
Can I ask a question? If, say, for example, a couple is arguing in their house and everybody can hear it walking by, and the neighbor calls the cops, and the cops come to, the police officers come to the house, and they don't answer the door, but they keep arguing. What's the remedy?
There isn't one, we can't go in.
What?
Unless there's any exigency, we can't go in.
Unless there's any what?
Exigency to go in, if there's an emergency taking place inside the house, that would allow us.
How do you know that?
That's up to the police officers to decide at that time.
Okay.
You can
if
call it
someone's
in as a
danger.
disturbance though, right?
Yeah, it still doesn't,
Still won't.
unless we know a crime is being committed, we can't go into somebody's house.
So somebody could be being beaten up.
If we have information that that's happening, then we could force entry into a residence. But if the officer cannot articulate that at the time, then we can't.
Have you ever had that happen?
Oh, yeah.
Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Those are the most dangerous calls for you to go on.
They really are.
Correct.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. We had a very similar situation about 10 years ago where two people were arguing, somebody called in, and we heard a female inside screaming for help, and we ended up forcing entry into that residence. So that gives us, that's reasonable in the moment to go into that residence and render any potential aid. But if people are just arguing, unless we have any reason to go in, we can't.
So just keep it low when you have your argument, okay? Any other questions, any other comments about 6? General. I think we're done. Moving on. We have a review of the CEAC laws, updated 2023, requesting an update was posted in the city website. Have we had changes to this, AJ, then? Is that?
So the last time this was fully updated and signed was 2020.
Questions for people. Have people had an opportunity to review it? Before I get moving on this. I think this is kind of important, and I want to make sure that we're comfortable discussing this.
Yep.
Are you okay with it? I mean, we can go through these and you can read them as we go. It's not heavy duty. But. All right, let's go through this. Guess we start by sections. We are known as the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right, that was an easy one. I think the next one is about the creation and the amendments and things associated with that. I don't think there's anything there, unless somebody sees anything. I think section 3 is probably one we should probably read and just address. Code Enforcement Advisory Committee is established an advisory committee. The City Council can regularly review the activities, services, and regulatory processes established within these sections of the Englewood Municipal Code enforced by the Code Enforcement Unit of the Police Department, and to provide recommendations to City Council for updates and modifications to those services and regulatory processes. Questions about that? I am going to ask the definition of regularly review. Another one of those terms. What do we believe is the intent of a regular review? That's one of our charges.
How would we interpret it?
Yeah, I mean, it's our committee,
see.
so we decide
Well,
what
We
are
regularly review it every meeting.
Okay. Can I ask our city council representative for interpretation of regularly review for this committee?
Well,
I'm just.
my interpretation, this is really what you're doing right now.
Right.
Right, and I think it's probably been a while. I mean, really, in the history of the committee, before I got on, potbelly pigs was the topic that talked about that. And it was ad hoc at that time too. They only met as necessary. Then after ad hoc, then chickens became the topic of discussion. And every time we would go, we'd talk about chickens. And actually, I think you weren't on the committee when we talked about the dangerous dogs, right?
Just the tail end.
Okay, and dangerous dogs lasted for quite a while too. But I am kind of glad that you're doing this, just even going through and reading, because, you know, getting to know what all the codes were responsible for is actually a great thing for the committee to review. And I think another thing, as people come to talk, there may be parts of the code that you want to look at that, because of things that people have shared for different reasons. But regularly reviewing, I think probably every couple of years when the committee has changed, totally, it's a good thing to go back and read it.
That's my take too. And you know, I'm into year 3 of this, and I'm reading some of this for the first time. And I know some of you have only been on the committee for a few months even, and but I think that it is definitely our charge to know this, or relatively well, or to ask the right questions, and we can't ask the right questions unless we've had the review. So I don't know that we want to edify this. I don't know that we have to write this in, but I would strongly recommend that this committee every other year do what we're doing. You know, that way you're catching everybody. Yes, sir.
The 2024 Board and Commission Handbook hasn't officially come out yet. However, according to the 2023 Board and Commission Handbook that City Council puts out for board and commissions, it says under bylaws, the enabling legislation for several boards, commissions, and committees provides for the adoption of bylaws governing the procedures of those bodies. Where such bylaws exist, they shall be interpreted in conformance with this adopted policy manual whenever possible. City charter and applicable provisions of the city code. Such bylaws shall be annually reviewed and approved no later than March of each year, and such approved bylaws submitted to the city clerk no later than April 1st of each year.
So that's the bylaws. So that's not the code, but that would be us doing this right now.
With the bylaws, correct, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So the bylaws need to be reviewed every year, right? And do we have a time in the schedule that we do that? I mean, I know it's been done on previous committees, but.
The last time the bylaws was gone through, rewritten and changed was in 2020. Since then, as long as I've been on, it's been brought up by that deadline that there are no changes, and then we just move on at that point. But it is from, so 2025, if we want to consider this year moving into that, we do have one alternate position and one reappointment coming for next year, so we shouldn't have too much change. With that, we would have to review it, approve it by March, and then if there's any changes or anything, would have to be approved and done before April 1st to the city clerk.
Makes sense.
So if we put it on the schedule and the agenda to have everybody read it and look at it in March, is that when it would be, or
February?
February?
Why don't
Well, when
we-
do the appointments come? They will
Probably.
come in February, right?
Probably February, I think.
So
Okay, they have to be
they
done
go
by
out, what, December, don't
March.
they?
In March, they have to be submitted to the city clerk no later than April 1st.
Okay, so if we set it as a regular March review,
Right,
then that would,
Maybe
we would
February,
actually
March.
catch people coming in, and we'd able
right,
to do
right,
that. Does
right.
that sound good?
Yeah.
Is that something
we
we
do it?
should put in the bylaws, to review the bylaws every March? You're saying that it's not, I don't think it's in here to require that we review the bylaws, correct?
Correct.
But we could put it in here.
It's advised.
I mean, it's advised by the council, and obviously we've been missing it the last couple of years anyway.
It's already in the bylaws.
It's in the bylaw.
That city council puts your charge as a board commission, that that's what you will do.
Okay,
So it's already written in there. If
Okay.
it's so much as just read through it and approve it and move on, that's your decision. Or if it's a deeper dive into it, if you want to start in January, that's your decision as well.
okay.
And I think in 2020, there was some pretty big changes in the bylaws in 2020. Because I think in the course of time, things happen and then you realize it when you read through them.
So I would recommend then that we, as a committee, just use the part of our March meeting to do that review. It could be less than we're doing right now if we need to, but at least to have everybody, put an eye on it and just come to the committee meeting ready to discuss any changes. Okay, I don't think we need to make any formal thing then. Powers and duties. I'm gonna let you peruse that yourselves. Anyone have any questions?
D,
D.
make annual written recommendations to all stakeholders as needed, but no less than annually.
So this provision of the bylaws is also part of municipal code regarding, it sets out the powers and duties of this commission. So that, I just wanted to point that out, that this requirement is also in municipal code.
And there was a time that we met with city council in a study session once a year. And we haven't done that for a while.
We never have. Not for 2 years.
And it's probably been longer than that, I think.
So does this seem to require that we make an annual list of recommendations? Is that the way that this is, that you're reading this, or we're reading this?
Or at least say we don't have any.
Or to say that we don't have any? Is that something that we
That
need
we
to
have done
report
our
to
job
council?
and that we don't have any.
Rita, is that expected of committees, do you know?
We haven't done it on council. We do it with some committees now, but the council was doing it fairly regularly. And some of it is I forgot. So on part D, it says regarding the responsibilities set forth in A, B, and C, which is the areas of code and the different things too. I actually think that if people come to speak, you probably would be getting more of an idea. I had lunch with somebody today and I suggested that they come next time. One of the issues they have is it has to do with tidy properties in the city of Inglewood.
Or the lack thereof.
Or, yes. And so, but I think if we got input from people, you would realize, and I don't know, maybe that's something you could put in one of the magazine articles. If you have suggestions for the committee, come and speak.
I agree with that. I feel like we don't hear people very often, so it's hard to know what is an issue that we should dig into more. We're just kind of reading through it, and that's good. But it would be great to hear people who maybe come to city council, express a concern they have, and it sounds like you're directing them, hey, come, talk to us, but maybe there are other ways we can encourage people. Do you think this could be written better? The code could be, come talk to us, we'd like to hear you. Maybe that could be something from like a comms perspective too, that we can.
And I think another thing that happened, but I don't do social media. People will let me know if there's something going on in social media. But if you do Nextdoor or things like that, sometimes there would be things going on next door that address issues that code might, so I think things may come up at social media with the city that could be items that you all want to look at.
Yeah, I like that recommendation. I think that that could be something, Edie, that the communication committee could almost make a standard sort of last line on almost any article we put in there. If you have questions and concerns, please contact us. You know, we are your representatives, we are your liaisons. And something along that line, I think that would be ideal, Eric.
I like
Absolutely
that,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe is that something we can continue to talk about in our next session, or
Sure.
just like what are the different channels we can open up for people? Like it doesn't always have to be one thing, is there, social media, whatever.
Yeah, I'm good with putting that on the agenda, because I don't know that we have something really for next month, but maybe what we could do is kind of open up what Edie and I have started in terms of the communication. We can explain to you what is already in place. And then maybe, we can kind of have some discussions about what else we should be doing or could be doing to reach out to the community. I think that's great. Cool. Can we put that on there, AJ? Thanks.
And I think
Have a discussion about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have people ask me questions just when I'm like passing out neighborhood welcome bags, because I'm a team captain. Or like when we have the parties, sometimes we'll invite like the mayor or Nathaniel to come, and different people ask lots of questions then. And then you can sort of get a feeling of like, well, my neighbor has these junk cars parked in their car, but you can't see them from the street. But I can see them from my chain link fence and I hate them. Or I get a lot, which is interesting. I'm glad that I can kind of direct them to who to ask, who to call the city and what to ask about. But it's interesting and of what.
So is it sponsored by the city? Do you get information from the city to take, or who does the welcome?
From Madeline.
Okay, actually,
I'll go around and like all the new houses in my neighborhood and bring them their little welcome bags, and I'll be like, yeah, there's good stuff in here. Just remember to shovel your snow, or don't let your weeds get too high. And there's a few more things in there, but things about the library and Pirates Cove and.
So the one thing, because this has been a couple of years ago, somebody had moved into a neighborhood and they trimmed their trees and they laid them all out on the street. Probably in the gutter, thinking they were going to be picked up. And when I went to talk to them, they didn't know. So, I mean, those are types of things too that when people move into the neighborhood. So.
Are the neighborhood leaders doing similar things in other neighborhoods also? Or is this just because you're an exceptional leader of your neighborhood?
It's all volunteer.
Right.
So if you want to go to the meetings, you can. If you want to pass out the bags to new people, new renters, you can.
Okay.
It's available
So
to you.
So Madeline set up these bags?
Yes,
Is that correct?
and
Okay.
and I said, oh, by the way, I have like 6 new people in the neighborhood.
Okay.
And a few of them aren't quite in my territory, but I'll pass them out anyhow. And she's like, great.
Is
And
there
you're-
any?
How do you know the new people?
I just see all the yard signs, all the for sale signs go up, or when the for rental signs go down. And so then I just walk around with my dog, and then I walk around and just leave them at their doors.
And your expertise is in code enforcement because you're on the committee. So
Yeah.
that's why you share all of that with them.
So
Yeah.
Correct?
could
But
there
also
be-
people want to know those things too.
Could there
That's
be
true.
something in those bags specific to code enforcement, which would be kind of like, hey, did you know that? And kind of come up with a few bullet points that might be helpful for people who throw their stuff in the curb, because that's the way they used to do it in their other town.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty well covered.
Do you think it is
Yeah,
within the bag?
yeah.
Okay.
I think it's pretty well covered, and if people just take the time to read it. But
Mhm.
Oh, that.
You know, what I have noticed is that people concerned with, they're not concerned so much with the code. They're concerned with the lack of enforcement of the code, right? That nobody does anything about that house that has junk in its yard and has had junk in its yard forever. And the code says you can't have trash in your yard, right? The code is covering that. Is if the codes were followed and enforced in Englewood, we would have one hell of a tidy neighborhood.
So would everybody.
I mean, it would be beautiful.
Either
I
that
mean,
or everybody would be angry because they're in
and maybe
trouble.
upset, yeah,
And
no
we've-
doubt.
We've kind of branched away from reviewing this, so I want to make sure we get through this tonight. I think those are all valid issues, and I think those are the kind of things maybe we could bring up as part of a larger communication discussion next month.
Okay,
Let's put that out there, and anybody who wants to put that, let's jump back into this. I want to kind of get through this. I had a question, and AJ, maybe you can address this. This is again in A, section A of the powers and duties. I'm seeing 4 different areas in here which were not things that we have reviewed, but it says according to this, found in Title 15, other positions implicated include but are not limited to the following. So I'm seeing burning fires, discharge of liquids, connections of fire hydrants, and wood burning that we have not addressed. Is this a purview of the Code Enforcement Committee?
So for example, burning and fires and wood burning is administered through the fire marshal's office.
Okay,
So depending if there's a burn ban, there may be different regulations versus no burn ban, like that. So that would be a co-investigation with the fire marshal's office. The fire marshal himself has the authority to issue summons. His inspectors don't. That's where we would get involved if there's any violations with that. But specifically for the fires, that's stuff that we will get involved with them. And discharge, I believe that's Title 11 is going to be next month's topic.
oh, it is, okay.
We haven't got to that yet. And then Title 12 connection to fire hydrants, that's actually regulated by South Platte Water Renew and Utilities.
Okay.
But we enforce the summons portion on that if there is an illegal connection. They will do the investigation, verify there is no permit, then reach out to us to issue that summons to court. And then they act as the expert witness of how much water was taken, what's the estimate cost that they need to pay back to the city. That's all done by one of the utilities inspectors
Okay.
for that violation.
And wood burning, is that something that you address, or does that go back under the fire marshal? And
It'd be primarily under the fire
Okay.
marshal, but that's something that we would address as well if they're either unavailable or if they need our assistance as well.
okay, thank you. I'm looking at C. The last line of C is develop community education efforts to inform the community about code enforcement initiatives and regulations. That sounds exactly like what we can be doing next month.
Yeah,
Is let's take a larger look at that.
because my sense is that, and myself included, don't know that this meeting happens, that I could come join and air my concerns. And it would be great for people to have that awareness.
Yeah.
Among other things.
Okay, anything else for the section 4 there? Anybody have any questions about that? Let's go on to 5 real quick. These are general organizational things, I think. I think D is important, has to do with sort of the delineation of if, when you speak publicly, if you are speaking for CEAC or not for CEAC. And I think that happens particularly at council meetings. When you stand up for public comment, is you want to make sure, if you ever do it, that if you're, especially if you're addressing something associated with this, to make sure that you're speaking as a citizen and not as a member of the committee. Any other questions on that? Okay, let's move on. Article 2, membership.
From your question last meeting, I believe B covers that, that the city manager has discretion.
And I think I'd asked that you take a look and make sure that the older versions of this were off the website. Has that been addressed?
Yes, I did receive confirmation from city clerk that this is the only one that's on the website.
Good, thank you.
So yeah, C, where there used to be 2 city council members, that's all updated, that there's only 1 assigned to this
Thank you.
committee.
Do we have anything that discusses alternates in here? Is that?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's also established in the board and commission handbook.
Oh,
The
okay,
council does allow an alternate for this committee.
okay.
That's section 6 also.
Oh, section 6, okay. Got it, yep. I see.
And just to reiterate, as far as removals or attendance, just make sure that you reach out to the chair of the committee and let them know if you can't be here. Obviously to AJ, because AJ's kind of keeping an eye on everything too. So. Anything else in Article 2 there? Is there any other questions? Kind of went through that pretty quickly. Okay, let's move on to 3. This is officers chairing the meeting, what the rights of voting as a chair are, and vice chair authorities. As I understand this, AJ, if I were not here today, that you would ask for a temporary chair for the meeting. Is that correct? Assuming we had the quorum.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions about 3? Any other questions on 3? Okay, let's go on to 4.
I have a question on that first section.
Bob's Rules of Order? Yeah. Well, you want to address what Bob's Rules versus Robert's Rules of Order?
Actually, council probably, I want to say 4 years ago, adopted Bob's Rules of Order.
There actually
There-
is a Bob's
There
Rules
is,
of Order.
Bob Widener wrote these rules for municipal governments, and it was really pretty simple. But then he wrote a new book now, and council adopted it, and it's like 200 pages is, I don't know if it's that long, but
It's still shorter than Robert's rules.
yeah, yes, Robert's Rules of Order is, so.
And I can recall when I came on the committee, it was asked that we review Bob's Rules of Order prior to coming into a meeting. So we kind of knew the procedures and stuff. And isn't it kind of like Robert's Rules Light or something like that?
It's something like that. And I mean, it's interesting because the city clerk's office used to train boards and commissions. They'd go over Bob's Rules of Order, and there is an online training course, is that correct?
Yes, there's a online training presentation that's done by the city for new members, as well as it's included in their packet for new members elected to all boards and commissions of the abridged version that we really follow.
Okay. Doesn't the rest of the world operate off of Robert's Rules of Order? Or is that changed? I guess I'm old fashioned.
So most like corporations or those kind of governing boards do utilize Robert's Rules of Order. In
Yeah.
Colorado, the most municipalities do use Bob's Rules of Order. There's the Colorado Municipal League, and they have assisted in publishing Bob's Rules, which is why there's that trend in Colorado municipalities.
Okay, okay. I stand educated.
Section 2, I kind of want to just discuss it, see what our thoughts on. And this has been in there, I think, since the beginning about the ad hoc meetings. As far as I know, there's no such thing as an ad hoc meeting in this group. This is a regularly scheduled monthly meeting. Do we leave that verbiage in there so that we have the option to do that? Or
Yes,
do we feel that?
because normally we take December off.
Yeah, and we do.
And sometimes there's times where we're all going on vacation, like in July or August. So it's good to have it open.
I just want to open that discussion to see how people felt about that. For such meetings, at least 3 days' notice must be given to each committee member, including liaison and the council members. That applies, I think, to the ad hoc nature of it. And so probably only if we decided to, I don't know, skip a meeting. I mean, we don't have to rewrite this thing, but I'm just bringing it up because it's kind of outside of what we typically do on this.
Right, and I think it would, originally this was an ad hoc committee, they didn't meet all the time. And they might meet once every 4 or 5 months, or maybe even 6 months. So we've kind of done the reverse.
And we can make those changes if we want to, but if everybody's okay with leaving the wording, let's just leave it alone.
And I believe we'll have to go back to city charter, but I believe the enabling legislation in 210.1 does say that it's an ad hoc committee. So if we decide to have regular meetings, that's fine, but I believe we'd have to get that enabling legislation changed.
Okay.
Is it a charter change or is it muni code?
If it's section 2, would that be charter?
Chapter 10, section 2, that's municipal code.
Okay, so meeting.
So if we leave it this way, then nothing has to change.
Yes, we don't have to work at it. It says the meetings are no longer than 2 hours. Everybody okay with that? Would you like 4-hour meetings?
No.
Okay, I just wondered.
Technology about 30 minutes left.
I think, I've been watching the clock myself. It's quorum information, agenda. Everybody okay with getting the agenda when we've been getting it? Does that feel comfortable for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions about 4?
I guess the section 7 on the agenda, format, last sentence, the format of meetings may be modified at the discretion of the committee. Is that true, or is it, some of the order of things dictated by somewhere else? Like we were just talking about the order of like when public comment is.
Mhm.
So we could change that order of things, or how am I?
So the order is set, however, for example, if the chair wants to not have public comment for a meeting, that's something that the chair and the board can choose to do.
Oh, okay.
So how it's set up is set. If you choose to cover each topic, that is determined by the
The order is set, but whether or not the items happen.
Well, it used to change.
Right.
When I first started, public comment was last.
Uh-huh.
So if people were calling in, they'd have to wait until we'd done everything that we wanted to do first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the order is now set by the policies and procedures by the handbook.
By the handbook.
So that the order is set, but like I said, if you'd like to skip something or not address something that meeting, like public comment, or if you didn't want to hear from me, or if you wanted to
I didn't
skip
know we had that.
council liaison,
Yeah.
that's up to the commission, that if you want to skip that and go straight into new business and not hear anything about that, that's something that you can choose to do.
We could skip, we just can't change the order.
Correct.
Got it. Yeah, okay.
So could this committee decide that maybe they wanted the municipal judge to come and talk to them about certain areas of the code or about something else? I know one time, and this has been, I've been on council 9 years, so this could have been 7 or 8 years ago. Judge Atencio was the judge at the time, and he came to talk about nuisance abatements. So we could do things like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you want the judge to come, or like we've done in the past with the city attorney's office, or the communications director, if that's something that you'd like, I can put the request in to the city manager's office, and then they can request that for that meeting.
We should keep that in mind. We don't think about that often. The Sustainability Committee always has a guest speaker, but we've never really taken advantage of it, and I think helping to get new perspectives, particularly from the judge. I think understanding, when we're talking about this stuff, what happens when it goes to him, and how's the process happen? I know he has a lot of leniency in things, and is able to make decisions about things, and it'd be interesting to hear from him. So maybe we can look at that for a later meeting or something.
Agreed.
Okay, anything else on this section? Not, we'll-
Section 5?
So going on to 5 now, finance.
I have a question. I was told we had no budget. Can we have a budget?
So really, there's no reason.
Managing nothing.
So we can disperse nothing? We can receive nothing? Why is it in here if we don't have a budget?
Good question.
What is Article 1, Section 3 about?
I don't know. This is Article 5, talks about our budget. Then
Article 1, Section 3 would be the purpose.
Oh, the
Section
purpose.
3.
Okay.
Purpose, yeah.
Do we know if this committee ever had any funds?
Not to my knowledge.
Yes, you're
If it was before Dave's and my time.
I think we talked about one point doing kind of a magnet thing or something, with a
Right.
Engle fix or
Tchotchkes.
something. Be kind of fun to do that, or have something to
With
pass out
Engle
at the
fix and-
neighborhood nights or something like that about the committee. Why don't we have money?
I would.
Why don't we have money?
We're broke.
We haven't had any gifts or grants.
Well, it says we can do a budget,
I think-
proposed annual budget during each July.
And it'd be a trickle down,
Pardon?
a trickle down with community relations. Like we can add things in.
Actually, we should ask the police department. I mean, they have a budget, maybe they're willing to.
Well, it seems to me, I was gonna go there too, but I know Dave spoke against that a couple meetings ago about not having money.
But this section says we can't have money.
We
It
can.
does, and we're supposed to present it in July.
And if we wanted money, that may be you. If we wanted money, how would we go about getting it?
I'd have to go back and look. I've been here almost 20 years, and I'm just trying to think back. I don't know if CEAC ever had a budget. I'd have to go back and look at some historical stuff somewhere to determine that.
I mean, I could see us using something occasionally, not, partying or anything, but, if we had something, which I think particularly would be community outreach,
Yeah, it would be a
and that
community
might
outreach.
be, communications. That might be going to communications and seeing if they had any money.
So people understand the code and
Right.
know how they can be empowered to enforce it through Engle fix and.
I think it would be interesting to see if there was any historical situation and what they actually used it for if they had it.
Can you look into that, AJ?
Yeah, I can put in a request to the city
Yeah,
clerk and
see
see what's
what's-
ever happened.
And if there is any way that we could secure some kind of budget, would open up options for us.
Yeah, so the process for if you want a budget would be to develop something, and then when the budget processes start with council, would be to present that as part of the city's whole budget in July when that goes forward.
Okay.
So if that's something you're interested in, we could get someone from finance in to give at least a timeline.
Yeah.
When there would be deadlines to get that in.
Sure.
But that would all have to be part of the budget process with the city.
Okay.
From my understanding, a lot of it, like the communications, that budget is there in neighborhood services with Madeline, with communications itself. So if there's something that wants to be published, their communications already has that budget for city publications. For example, Anglefix was not done because that was already a project of communications. That's something that they've already pushed out, they've publicized, they've sent out mailers and done all that already for Anglefix. But if there's anything else, that's something that we can present to outside of the magazine or anything else. And I know in the welcome baskets or bags, code enforcement does have a full page front and back of frequently asked questions. If you have what's trash service, what's snow removal, what's grass and weeds, that there's just a flyer in there that is all part of it. Like you said, it's all put out by Madeline. So that is in their budget as well. If there is something specific you want to put out, that's something we can ask for.
Would you reach out to Madeline and see if we can get a copy of that?
Copy of what?
Of what they put in about code enforcement, just so we can
Do
put
you
our
want me
eyes
to
on it?
bring you a bag?
Oh, well, a whole bag?
Yeah, bring me the whole bag. You can analyze it.
Well,
you
I'm
think?
just thinking that,
I have an extra bag on my dining table. I could like drop it off
why don't
sometime.
we, let's go through the official channels and see if we can reach out to Madeline, just say so that they understand that CEAC is looking at that, okay? Let's just see if she has a copy and she can, email us a copy, and we can send that out or something,
Copy of
of what goes in the bag.
The welcome
everything
bag.
that goes in.
No,
there.
just the code enforcement stuff.
Okay, all right.
Can you do that? I'm a delegator, by the way.
Yeah, well, my guess is that I won't get a response because she's pretty busy.
Oh, I just call her multiple times. Either call or email and then I alternate. And there's she gets back to me.
We're almost through this. Any other questions
Has
for
to be
the
Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday? She works from home. Any other questions about this? I kind of want to keep moving because we are kind of running through some time. No other questions? I think it's pretty straightforward. Okay. Good with that. Any committee member have anything they want to bring up? Okay. I think we've covered a couple things here about next meetings. So I think we're on our track. Everybody good with that? Anything else anyone wants to bring up? Okay. If there's nothing else for anybody, I'd like to adjourn the meeting.
There's just moving forward, the next meeting is November 20th at 6 o'clock, same room. The question is, since I will be doing the agenda for November meeting, the December meeting is the Wednesday prior to Christmas. Typically, this committee has elected to take December off. If that's something we want to decide tonight, I can put that in the agenda so people are aware of it at least a month ahead of time. If you want to wait till next meeting, we can do that as well, but just wanted to bring it up.
Let's
That
put
is
it in
intent.
the agenda so we have a chance to have the group decide. Everybody okay with that?
And when is Thanksgiving? It's the week after our meeting?
28th.
The week before.
The what?
Our meeting is the week before.
Week before.
Yeah, so week and a day before.
So if someone wants to do a motion for a December meeting, you can go ahead and do that as well.
Can we do the motion now and then just vote on it here?
Mhm.
Okay, you guys want to vote? Great.
Yeah.
Okay, I motion that we skip December.
I
second.
second. Well, I'll second.
Just one. Okay, all in favor of skipping December?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, thanks, guys.
So, no,